Q&A session. So, one of the uh, things about, having sessions like these is that, we actually get to connect and talk to each other. Usually in our busy daily life schedules, it does not
Yeah,
really happen because of our work commitments and all of that. So it's a nice thing to have a learning session like this once in a while.
yeah. I think it's going to be a new normal in future too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I think so
yeah,
too. And I think it should be. It should be. Even if
yeah.
things go back to the way it was, which I very much doubt, I think this should continue,
This should
because I think
continue,
it's a nice way to,
particularly.
yeah,
Even like
it's a
last
nice
so
way
many
to,
days, I have attended so many virtual talks of others. And it's very good
right.
learning, very good understanding of what people are doing, where the world is going. Probably this has given us opportunity to world to connect with each other more. Let's
Correct.
look at
Correct.
positives. Yeah.
And then let's look at all the positives. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we have a fair number of people who are now
Yeah.
joining. Okay, so just let me begin the session with introducing you first, and then I'll
Okay.
introduce myself.
Sure.
So very interestingly, Kedar Bide is graduated from the Haskeen Institute with a diploma in management studies and with a diploma in management studies from Mumbai University. He is a herpetologist, a snake rescuer. Kedar is one of our judges. He has always been a part of our judging process for almost all of our wildlife related contests and competitions at a national level. And Kedar is extremely passionate. That is one thing that I know about him. He is extremely passionate about not just about photography. It makes him a wonderful wildlife photographer. But he is extremely passionate about wildlife, about animals, about the environment. It was his job for the last 3 decades. He was actually an environment health professional. So, Kedar, my first question to
Yeah.
you. Okay, let me introduce myself first. My name is K.
Yes,
Madhavan
better.
Pillai. I'm the chief editor of Better Photography. Welcome to this live session with Kedar Bide. Kedar has been a wonderful friend to Better Photography and to me on a personal level. And I think that as someone who does wildlife photography, some of his photographs are absolutely stunning. So, Kedar, my first question to you is
Hmm.
regarding your professional career. You spent 30 years, 3 decades, being an environment health professional.
Right.
So, can you tell the viewers what that actually means and what is that?
I
What does that?
see the environmental health expert is actually that word, terminology is little confusing. It's nothing to do with the direct health of environment as such, but it's about the public health which happens due to the environment, like malaria, dengue, today's corona. So my
Correct.
expertise was in zoonotic diseases, animal-borne diseases, and how to control those diseases. So I work with some of the big names like Sumitomo, BASF, Tagros Chemical, looked at different leadership positions and headed the pest control division as well as public health division in different roles. So it was kind of techno commercial nearly for 3 decades, as from my junior research fellow to Hafkin. To when I left in 2017, I was a global head public health in one company. So it was quite a long trip, which actually funded my passion of wildlife photography and everything.
And I think it must have, because looking at, hearing all this, it must have given you some perspectives too, right? About the environment and about wildlife and about
Yeah,
the human connection to it.
completely. We One of the best perspective which I have got throughout this career is that you cannot remove human from wildlife and nature. It's a part of wildlife and nature. So we need to also address ourselves as not a third party, and now we are trying to save nature or the environment or not trying to save wildlife. We are part of that. So if we save nature and wildlife, we are going to save ourselves also. But you cannot have a extreme views about conservation or saving something also. Human needs certain developments and human needs certain demands, so you have to balance it such a way that you keep environment and nature without any destruction and reduce your growth or demand so much that you are not competing anymore with nature. And that's how at the end I felt that it's enough in corporate. Just check it off and start reducing my requirement, so then I can really think about nature and environment in a larger way.
A little later in this session, I'm going to also ask you a couple of questions which may be related to your profession,
Okay.
earlier profession. But after your stint with the public health and the environment, after that aspect of your life, in 2017 you started NatureWorks India,
Right.
which is essentially got to do with art quality or very high quality printing. Can you let us know about something about this?
Two things. When I wanted to leave my corporate career and wanted to start something which is for nature, of nature, and from nature. So I had only two expertise: my snake conservation work and my photography. I didn't have any other expertise into nature and wildlife as such. So I wanted to do that time my solo exhibition of my wildlife photography of last 2 decades, and I wasn't happy with any printing which I was getting. So I thought that there is a niche segment here which I can go into the printing and do some customized work for artists. So one of the vertical which we started with nature work is printing, which is very different. And other things which we do is help NGOs to sell their products, do snake bite conservation work. I run a campaign called Zero Bite. So it's completely for nature, from nature, and of nature in that way. And
Right.
I'm happy in that. Right.
So NatureWorks, as the as the founder of NatureWorks, do you see the the kind of difference in the service, some of the services that you offer? Because I know some photographers personally who actually come to you for their printing
Right.
requirements, and I know that some of these photographers are very particular about how they
Yeah.
want their images. So can you tell us something about quality in printing as and expectations from a photographer's end, and how difficult it is for you to manage that aspect of printing?
One thing, if you really want a good printing of your work, a photographer need to get involved into printing process. Okay, you cannot just send a picture and say a printer will do its job, because the ultimate the intention or the visualization is of a photographer. If printer doesn't understand that visualization, the printer will not be able to print a good print of your work completely. So my idea when I started this work was not to start a huge commercial studio where I will get 1,000 print order a day, but I love to work with photographers coming themselves, or at least discussing virtually with them about what they want in the end of their printing. They need to get involved, because print media is a very hard media. It will show all your faults. Okay, the screen, because of backlight, hide a lot of your faults.
Well said.
But
Yes,
print
absolutely.
media
Well said.
doesn't hide any of your faults. So say if a photographer had converted a particular image with more blue cast, because the photographer's visualization is like that, and while printing I remove that blue cast, then I'm not doing a good work as such. So when I started the work, it was very difficult to tell photographers that you need to get involved. Today the job has happened in such a way that those who print generally send the images. Probably, if they get a good work, they print again. If they don't get a good print, they don't print again. Okay, that's how the
Right.
printing has gone down. So my first step was to get comfortable with photographers, get them involved in the process, and get a final output the way their visualization was or the artistic intent was, while taking the picture. If you don't have that as a photographer, it's my job to see that my prints are my visual intent, not somebody else or a technician with some printer, who thinks this picture needs this much magenta, this much violet or something, and give you a print. I want it so whatever I do is that we communicate. Communication with photographers is very, very important. And I'm happy doing small work because, today customization is needed in art. Art cannot be like a mechanic,
Absolutely.
And as you are spending so much time in photographing, you can always spend a little time in printing too. Okay. The economic part rest aside, the artistic intent need to be preserved when you print something. And that's where I have worked last 3 years. And that's how some of the photographers who comes, they keep coming. And those who doesn't have time to do their printing at much of their visual interest, they probably don't come. But I'm happy with the work which I'm doing at the moment.
Very well said. I think that's so critical. I think the photographer and the printer have to work together. Now, it's very interesting because usually many photographers, especially wildlife photographers, have taken to the mode of the primary mode of income being education.
Yeah.
So short-term workshops and short-term tours, and and I know that you also conduct a few of these yourself. I have seen you put up a few, in the past, I have seen a few workshops which
Hmm.
you've conducted, and
Right.
all of that. And in your particular case, you moved into another direction,
Hmm.
which is basically the print media, which is
Right.
also so very important for a photographer to actually get into printing, because I think
Right.
printing, because usually in most cases, they have highly specialized printers, but so very few of them. I think it is so important for a photographer to get into
Right.
printing. But how difficult is it to fund your primary passion, which is wildlife photography?
Hmm.
Your initial 30 years of your life, you were working, and you use that money to become a wildlife photographer, and
Hmm.
now you've started a business. So tell us something about that journey, because the thing is that a lot of young wildlife photographers want to be into wildlife photography alone. So what is the advice that you would give them?
Two things. If you are into education, like my friends Sudhir Shivaram and others are into, or you are into photo tourism, like what Jayan Sharma, Sachin Rai, those do, there is no money just for a wildlife photographer anywhere, By just selling your prints to books and magazines or selling the prints into exhibition, it's not a viable option. Okay. So those who wants to, either you need to get a National Geography background or Animal Planet background, some big background, you know. I know, or you need to have such a huge passion that the money is the secondary to you. Then only you get into a wildlife field as a photographer. But if you, what you call, support them with your education or a photo tour, yes, there used to be a big way. I don't know, 2 months down the line with this COVID, what's going to happen. We will not be able to predict at the moment anything where the tourism is going or where the. But I think photography will remain because photography is a documentation of civilization and it will never go down. And printing will also remain as it is. Photography will remain as it is. Nature and wildlife probably will get a better, because people have understand value of nature and environment now. So probably will get a much better traction from the funders and from the other markets, where probably there will be a better earning. But be ready to get dejected for some more years till you get a name there and till you get a fame there completely.
Okay. So when you said that, about the kind of sacrifices of wildlife photographer, basically it reminded me of Ditiman,
Yeah.
Mukherjee, who, he enormous sacrifices for being where he is today. Terrific, enormous sacrifices that he has made for being where he is today. Yeah, so, how does this is, of course, it's a quintessential question. Everybody asks this question. I've been asking everyone, all the other wildlife
Hmm.
photographers that I've been speaking to, I've been asking this question. What would be the first steps of getting into something like wildlife photography?
Just spend time in the field with your camera, experiment and learn. Certain art forms are basic how to operate your camera. You can learn probably through workshops, and you can understand a little bit about it from Google. But if you really want to work, then you need to get into the field and start experimenting, learn yourself probably what works, what doesn't work, study about the animal behaviors and other things, and work on them. And if you really want to be a good photographer, you have to be in a field. You cannot think about being a good photographer sitting in your home and dreaming about it. Okay. So you need to be in a field. And that's where sometimes I feel really upset with me that I don't get time so much to be in a field as such. But if you really want to start, then spend maximum time in a field with your equipment. The photographs need to be made, they need to be designed. Only some photographs are last moment photographs where something is happening, you are opportunity to be see that and you photograph it. Otherwise, you have to study hard to get a particular frame. You have to struggle, you have to travel a lot of kilometers, sit at one place for 6 hours, 8 hours to get a particular frame. So be ready for physical work, be ready for mental conditions also, because there is no money also, as well as you are spending money and you are spending your time in it. But the satisfaction quotient is much higher in nature and wildlife photography than any other photography. Like after doing it for nearly 2.5 decades, I can tell you that if I would have done the street photography or any other thing, I probably wouldn't have been that satisfied with myself the way I satisfy or be happy about shooting something which is really, really good. You know?
So let me, come back to you with a question right there.
Yeah.
So my personal favorite kind of photography is street photography. So,
Okay.
and I have tried my hand at wildlife. Okay, and it requires a tremendous amount of patience. So from my perspective, it's very different. I would say that wildlife photography is extremely difficult and tough. Street photography is so much more easier. But one thing that I'll definitely agree with you is that you have to go there and start in the
Yeah.
field. The reason is because the minute you go into the field, you suddenly realize that you're getting results. And it is when you see those results that you're getting, you are encouraged, you feel very happy with yourself that there is time spent and there is results that are coming through and visible results that are coming through.
Yeah.
And if you're a sensitive person, you automatically, your second image, third image, fourth image, you start getting a lot of ideas. You
Yeah.
become very observant. And that automatically translates. Your very second day on the field will be so much better than the first day of the field
Yeah.
on the field.
Right.
That is something that I've noticed, which is
Yeah.
probably common with wildlife photography and with street photography both.
Yeah, but before we go further, Madhavan, just one more point. I tried my hand at street photography and I failed miserably. I don't know what to do with so many heads, legs, feet, bags, and people moving around. And that's not my cup of tea at all. That's shooting people is the most difficult thing, because they are the most unpredictable animal on earth. All other animals are predictable.
So there was an interview with David Dubile that was
Yeah,
conducted by Better Photography, a very famous underwater
I
photographer.
know.
And he had many National Geographic covers, and he happened to mention. So there was a question because you see the pictures that he shot of sharks, and some of them are quite scary. And so we asked him this question, where aren't you worried? Aren't you afraid of the shark, especially when it's coming at you like that? And he said that, look. The way I see it, an angry mother-in-law is more dangerous than an angry shark. So,
Probably right.
so
After I also did a lot of work with snakes, so I can understand that. Probably right.
so you do a lot of underwater photography too, don't you?
Not lot. I started around 4 5 years back. Not reached to the stage like I do the above the water yet, but still trying, still learning.
Okay, so
Because
you are
for
a
underwater
diver and you.
photography, yeah, but to become a good underwater photographer, you need to be a good diver first. And that's where I am at the moment, still learning. I am not that expert diver yet. So I go in the water and I have my little control on buoyancy, but I think I need to more work on that. So I will not say I'm a very good underwater photographer yet.
But I have seen some photos that you had posted or you had sent us at some point of time. Pictures that you shot underwater. Did you shoot this?
Yeah,
Do
I
you
shoot
shoot underwater?
underwater. I shoot underwater, but like when I go out in above the water and if I'm shooting say 100 frames and the results I get, and if I shoot 100 frames underwater and the result I get, still there is a lot of difference of 70-80% of a good shots and a bad shots. You know, so probably I need more time underwater to get my underwater photography more under control. I think Madhavan is having a lag. I think Madhavan will join back. Just give us a half a minute. His net connection probably wouldn't have been. Yeah, welcome back, Madhavan.
Thank you, Kedar.
Yeah.
I think this is also going to become a part of our daily lives going forward.
Yeah, probably. So the patience will increase, I think, of everybody.
Correct, correct. Yeah. So you were mentioning about your underwater photography
Yeah, as I was
and
saying, I'm not yet reached to the proficiency of underwater photography the way I want. probably the people who see my images say, hey, you are a good underwater photographer, but you have to get self-satisfaction first that you are really happy in that environment and start doing some creativity. At the moment, I am just doing a documentation in underwater, and the word is so beautiful. If you just shoot without applying your brains, also you get a beautiful pictures underwater. So to do a much better work underwater, after David Dabler or Paul Nicklin, or there are many others, or
Right.
Digant Desai in India, or the Sumer, or there are a lot of people in India.
Sumer Verma. Right.
You need to be
Right.
really, really a good diver, and then you can do your photography skills afterwards. So at the moment, probably I will say I am an underwater documenter, not a photographer as such. I dive with my camera. I see such a beautiful things, and I try to just document it. Probably it will take some more time for me to do a little creativity underwater, or visualize something better. But I will be there soon.
Okay. So tell us something about your favorite places to shoot. What would be your absolute favorite places to shoot?
Always high altitude, Ladakh in winter. That's my
You
kind of place where I actually, now it's better that I think, we can buy land in Ladakh. So probably I will think about going there, buying a small room and retire there only for winters, not for
Fantastic.
summer, only for winters.
Fantastic. So you've shot extensively in Ladakh.
Yeah,
You've been to Ladakh many times.
nearly last 13 years, 14 years. But after 3 tours in summer, I think I've been there 14 times only in winters.
Okay.
Only in
Wonderful.
winters.
Wonderful. And which are the other favorite places of yours? So do you have other
Always
favorite
Northeast
places?
India, Arunachal Pradesh, because of my working on snakes there and the microfauna. You get butterflies, birds, and everything, and the culture both ways. So I've done extensive work in Northeast and Arunachal and Ladakh as such. Not so much into tiger lands.
Right. Right. You mentioned snakes, and I know that you've been into rescuing snakes. You have a foundation of your own called Zero Bite. Can you tell us something about that?
Actually, snakes is much older than the photography. In when I was with Hopkins Institute at JRF, the snake house was a part of my responsibilities, where we used to extract venom and make anti venom. As well as I volunteered with Pune Snake Park at Katraj before I joined Hopkins after my graduation in zoology, and I was always fascinated with snakes. So I did a lot of work on snake rescue for nearly 10-15 years, did some exploration, first report from India of 2 species. But last nearly 2007 onwards, I am spending my more time, not actual work on snakes, but working on a snake bite death mitigation and reduction of snake bite deaths in snake rescuers themselves, creating SOPs, working with communities about prevention, first aid, training doctors about treatment of snake bite. So this Zero Bite campaign is for the snake bite death mitigation. More than 50,000 deaths happen in India every year. We talk about corona, thousands and lakhs, but every year in the world there are 1.38 lakh deaths because of snake bite envenomation. So it's not like it's a small thing, it's a huge thing. It's a huge animal human conflict which we need to work on. But my photography also is related to snakes. I brought a camera and started photographing because I wanted a picture of snakes to do awareness programs. So for nearly first 4 years of my photography life in 95 around, I only photographed snakes for 4-5 years, nothing else. And probably last 10 years I haven't photographed much snakes except Costa Rica and some places, because
No, but I've seen some of your snake photos. I think they're
yeah.
magnificent. Some very, very good snake photos.
Yeah, but that also we need to understand. Snake photography is a little bit not like other wildlife photography where you go in a jungle and you shoot. But 80 to 90% times it's a control environment photography where you are not allowing snakes to go. You found a snake in a jungle, you control it and then you shoot it. And probably photographers should write it under their pictures that this has been done under control environment. You should not just go and catch a snake or something like that, So because some snakes can be venomous. So it's certain photography like snake photography, probably shark photography and others. These are little bit responsible photography where you need to be really, really aware about animal welfare.
Hmm. Hmm. Kedar, let us speak a little bit about this, what you're talking about right now, about
Okay.
animal welfare, and especially in wildlife. Because even as a judge, I've noticed how you rejected certain photos on the basis of this particular aspect, that the
Yeah.
photographer has not been respectful.
Hmm.
So let us talk about a little bit about, as a judge and as a photographer, about some of the mistreatment and some of the problem areas that happen with photography in wildlife. And let's say an avid photographer or a hobbyist photographer goes, what should the photographer really know and understand and do in the wild?
Uh,
So just to ensure
yes.
that sanctity is maintained.
One thing is understand distance. What is the safe distance from a particular animal? Both ways, safety to you as well as safety to the animal. Second thing, try to avoid harassing, stressing, mothers and juveniles or the adult animal going to water. Animals generally move around for their life. They are living there. So just don't get between their living. And probably I always say to others, whatever practices you do to shoot something, if you can write it under your picture, then I think you are probably ethical. If you feel that no, I can't write this because I will get, then probably you are not ethical. I always tell,
Hmm.
okay, if
Hmm.
you feel
Hmm.
you are ethical, why don't you write it under your photographs? And then I don't see people writing that under the photograph, how they have achieved that particular photograph. If you are not ashamed about your way of taking a particular picture, then probably you are ethical. But if you are little ashamed, that means you have done something wrong, you have crossed some limit somewhere. So I always tell people, if you don't have any problem of writing below how you took that picture, I think you are probably in your ethical limits. But if you have a problem in writing below the picture how you did it, or somebody asked and then you don't know, you don't want to share or you want to tell them, then probably there is something to think about
Right.
in that way, because
Right.
there is no black and white here. There is a lot of gray area into animal
Hmm.
ethics and wildlife photography, and situation to situation, something is bad, something is good in particular situation, another situation the same thing can be bad. So you cannot have a standardized SOP saying that, but certain blanket rules are there. No nest photography, okay, of a birds, because that disturbs them. Stay away from juveniles and mothers.
Hmm.
Don't come in between animal and their food. Don't come
Right.
between animal and water. You know, don't try to create something by harassing animal and making it climb on something because you want a picture somewhere on a high elevation. And don't
Right.
bait. Baiting is also sometimes is difficult and it's not acceptable in many of the things. So don't bait the animals to take picture. Probably certain spreading grains around your house to get sparrows and birds and photographing them probably is okay, but killing something and putting it as a bait for carnivore animal may not be accepted
Hmm.
as such.
Right, right. And how often, as a judge, again, how often have you encountered these kind of situations and these kind of practices? Especially because we are talking about Indian photographers, and something that Indian photographers should also know that this kind of a behavior is not acceptable. How often have you found this happening?
I think many years back I used to find it much more, but in today, I don't know whether it's gone down or people have got expertise to hide it. That I am not yet sure
Okay.
of, because the quality of the pictures you get in competitions now are quite good, and you have to give benefit of doubt to photographers, even if you think there is something wrong and if you can't prove it. You have to give
Hmm.
benefit of doubts to the photographers in these competitions. You cannot say is my opinion is like this, but if you feel that this picture is possible in nature, in a natural environment, you should just go ahead and allow it. But nowadays, because of post processing and digital, you have an option of deleting and shooting again, processing it better. So chances of doing something unethical also has reduced a little bit. Earlier, you never know till you come back and wash your rolls and see what's happening before
Correct.
digital. Then probably the photographers would have gone to certain other ways to get the right results at the right time that time, because
Correct. Right.
to go back and shoot something will be a problem. But today, I think probably that need of unethical also has gone down, because you have more opportunity to shoot, more opportunity to travel, and with digital media, I think that is the benefit of one digital media you have.
So digital photography and digital technology has definitely helped
Definitely help.
in the
Yeah.
environment also, because the older processes used to be chemical based,
Yes.
which meant that it also had its own effect on the environment.
Yeah.
Speaking of environmental effects, speaking of the kind of effects that we have on the environment, and especially the situation of the lockdown that we have today, we know that the pollution is a lot less. In just 2 months, there has been so much of recovery that has happened. There are, there's wildlife that is actually coming out onto the streets. There is the ozone layer has shown strange kinds of effects on the ozone layer. The hole in the ozone layer has healed miraculously. Countries are showing a huge dramatic drop in population. I think even the sunlight is looking a lot clearer now. So I notice the shadows in my room at 5:30 every evening. I think the shadows are different and they look much more resplendent, I would say, at this point of time. Colors are showing through. So now, in this kind of a scenario, what would you say would be, is this going to remain? Is it going to stay? Should we be passing laws in the government that will help the situation? Is it going to go back to square one? As a professional in this field, I wanted to ask you this question. What do you think is going to happen?
If you're looking at last, again, Marvin, connection is going to go.
I think again it's
Marvin
freezing.
comes back. Yeah. Okay, you're back. Okay. I think we probably will lose him again. Yeah, you're back, I think. Okay.
Okay, back.
So what I feel is we'll go back to our bad ways. I don't think the humankind have improved or will improve after this lockdown. The laws are always there, It's the problem of we don't follow those laws, and we find ways and other different ways to break down those laws, Now, if you are looking at the lockdown, it will teach us. It has taught us, but within the lockdown itself, our Minister of Environment had approved 6 big infrastructure projects, which is going to destroy our nature and environment by a virtual meeting. One way we are trying to do the corona and COVID is due to the environment destruction. And at the same time, when world is not watching and world is under lockdown, our ministry has gone ahead and destroyed, maybe around 5 lakh, 6 lakh trees in Arunachal, by allowing hydro projects there in a very different risky areas. So I don't think humankind will ever improve, Probably there will be more write-ups on this, and people will say that we have seen a great lockdown of our, in 1 century of kind of thing. But human being is gone beyond repair, I think. They will not improve at all. We have such a huge population, so much greed and so much money earning everywhere that it will not change, and coronas like this thing will keep coming, and we'll go into lockdown for 2 months, again come back and destroy everything, again go back maybe a lockdown 5 years, 10 years down the line, we never know, and I think this cycle will go on. The only thing is that probably the pollution levels, as it has gone down, and because of the economy, we will see this clean environment for some more time, because the economy goes down, everything goes down, which is polluting the whole environment as such. But I don't think human being will improve anyway. Maybe 5%, 10%, but otherwise the 90% population doesn't care. They just care about their survival in it.
Right. So I think that before it's too late, I think if whoever is viewing this, I think it's important for us to at least do certain things that we can, some things that we can do, like reduce our own carbon footprint in some ways. A few years ago, Kedar, after my daughter was born, I don't know if you know this, I started asking these questions, about the environment and about what is the kind of a world that my daughter is going to grow up in. And it's a very scary thing. You read the reports, the environmental reports. You read what's going to happen to the coastal regions around the world, and Asia in particular has got most of its population in the coastal areas. You read some of those reports, and all the predictions, they are all negative. So then it became a question of what am I doing? I'm just pointing fingers. I'm just looking at the other person and saying, that other person is, more responsible than I am. So why should I not be responsible? So that was the point of time when, after talking with my family, after speaking to them, we are now separating our garbage.
I'm losing you,
Um,
Madhavan, again.
Have I frozen? Have I
Sorry, I
frozen?
lost you in between.
Yeah, yeah. So can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Still gone. Do you want to sign out and sign in again? No, I think you are back. Okay.
No, I say. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm not sure. I think that the internet connection is going to keep fluctuating. But I realized that a few things can make a big difference. Basically, that's what I figured out. And then again, I think that's a better option right now. Freezing too much.
Can't hear you. Yeah, now it's okay. Now it's okay. I can hear you
Okay.
properly.
Okay. So we started this policy in our home to separate the garbage. The wet waste is separated from the dry waste. The dry waste is entirely sold, entirely recycled.
Okay.
The wet waste that comes out, and surprising, how much wet waste we have, which we have just discarded and thrown into a garbage dump. The dry waste, and it's also very surprising that we learned that the dry waste, almost 100% of it can be recycled.
Yeah.
So things like this can be very easily done in any home. We are now composting the wet waste. Okay, so we have like 5 bins, and every single day the wet waste is composted at my place. And luckily, I have a little garden in my front of my house, so it all goes into my garden. And small things like we started keeping water. In a it's called that old grinding stone that we used to. So there's one grinding stone in my garden. We just pour water every day and clean it every day. The numerous number of birds and animals, and these are tiny things that I think all of us can do. Which unfortunately is not done. But I think that it is important to become very sensitive.
Yeah, very
to wildlife and
sensitive.
the environment.
Reduce your requirements. Probably stop competing as a race. Okay, take it lightly. I always used to say that the biggest environmentalists are those bangarwalas who keep recycling everything from your house. They buy
Right.
it and they go for recycling. And probably the second most environmentalists are those people who are trying to reduce population by spreading family planning methods. These are the two biggest environmentalists today. But everybody need to play their role. Then only something will happen as such.
Right.
As such.
Right. Okay. So finally, let's come down to photography. I think it's
Good.
time
I
that we
think a
spoke
lot of
about
people will be
photography.
interested in that more than our environmental aspirations.
Right. So basically, as soon as the session ends, Kedar, please don't forget to share this on IGTV.
Sure.
And to if you can, if you get the option of saving it to your phone, please do. We will keep this onto our website. We'll put it up onto our website as well, so that the message goes across. People
Surely, I
watching
will
this, the
save
message
it
must.
and send it to you guys also, and also put it on IGTV. Not issue.
Sure. So one of the things that I've noticed that the kind of photography that you do is against the sun photography. It's something that you shared a presentation of. Can you tell me something? You call it the sunny side up.
Yeah, I always, you can call me a solar person. I love sun. And I always try to understand different elements into a nature and how they are relation to each other. And everything is dependent on sun in nature and environment. Everybody's life goes on when the sun rises and sun sets, and everything happens with that. Though as a photographer, we are all sun worshippers. We photograph with light in that way, but we hardly use sun into our photography as a subject. Okay, and I always I always seen photographers in the field shoot in the morning and shoot in the afternoon and evening, and in the noon around 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and everything, which just goes, and they either sleep because they say the light is bad and everything. But I think I have done the photographs which I like more of mine. Many of them done at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The landscape I am talking about, not about animals, because animals race during that time as such, in that way. Now, when I'm saying, photographers use this word against the sun a lot. where the light is basically against your subject. It has nothing to do with the sun in the frame as such. So I personally use the terminology shooting directly into the sun. It can be against the sun, it can be with the sun, it can be side lighted, it can be backlighted, but I call it shooting into the sun personally. And I just love doing that, and I keep experimenting with it a lot. If you allow me, let me show, some pictures about the whole thing as such.
Yes.
There are 4 kinds of photography you can do with shooting into the sun. One where you add an element. If you can see this, I don't know how to remove my camera. Can you see the pictures, all of you?
Yes, it's fairly visible.
No,
I think, in fact,
am I coming into the somewhere picture?
Yes, you are on the right hand side of the image.
So
it's
the sun
blocking
the sun itself.
I think about 20%.
Yeah, but
yes, it's blocking the sun itself.
It's blocking the sun itself. Okay,
yeah,
let me take another thing in that. Okay, 1 minute. Take this picture. With sun you can create a different moods by using the sun in the frame, or you can do some creativity by doing the whole ring lighting things against a particular thing, or you can do some shadows. And where is the other picture? When they show the pictures on the below, that continuity goes. Take this picture again.
This is beautiful.
You can create different shadows, you can create different lights the way the mood you want. So by using sun, either you can add value to a particular frame by adding a sun as an element, or you can create a shadows and light play which you will like. The third reason is you can do a different mood into a frame by creating a different lights using the sun. And fourth is you can do a lot of creativity by doing side lighting. So these 4 different types you can use your sun into your frames as such particularly. And generally for me, there are 2 approaches to do that. One, include sun into your composition as an added element which value add to your existing composition. Let me again show you an example of that. See this. It's a landscape picture, but putting a sun there has added value to it.
Beautiful.
And that's how you can use a sun to add a value to your existing composition, or you can use elements around it. Like this. Here I thought I want to shoot a sun in a Himalaya quite up around 11-12 o'clock with the whole Himalayan range. So this is around 17,000 feet in the Rumbak Valley called Hoshing Valley. But either compose around sun as your center object, or you can add sun into your other elements just as a value addition. So these both approaches you can do while shooting into the sun. Then there are multiple ways you can look at doing, you can use sunrises. Again, the sun is gone here to create a different mood. Sunrises and sunsets are pretty easy pictures to click, which everybody does, or you can have a silhouette, backlights kind of thing. But the difficult pictures into the whole scenario will be when the sun is in the high, where again, as I say, there are 2 things. One, you can hide sun completely behind some elements, or you can hide sun, halfway somewhere. Look at this. This is a frozen lake in Ladakh, where the sun is hidden behind the border of the snow to get those 2-3 stars. That way you can use the sun, or you can hide in a way. Let me see again some pictures.
Beautiful.
Wait. Or if you are in a central Indian park. Sorry?
So there is one interesting question that was asked by one of the guests about ND filter. So so the guest is asking, the viewer is asking, this is by Photoki. Okay,
yeah.
So the viewer is asking, is this ND filter 8? Have you used an ND filter here?
No, in most of my sun pictures, 1 or twice I have used the ND pictures where I want water to be a little slow down and other thing. But I generally use only CPL, center polarizer, and very, very small aperture. most of the pictures are at 22, f22, and I will come to that about what can be done, without using a ND. Somewhere you have a very high exposure, you may need a ND, so I keep it in my bag. But the CPL which I use more, and the ND I use rarely, particularly in sun. But yes, in slowing down water in a waterfall and everything, yes, I have used ND. I can show those pictures also where the ND is used. Here the ND is used.
Okay.
This is Bedaghat there, or this where the ND is used. So it depends on what kind of elements you have in a frame, and you want to slow down certain water, or what you need to do. Because your shutter speed is going to be little fast with a small aperture to get the sun in that star effect, or little low down. So
Right.
it's only
Right.
depending on what elements you have in a frame to use ND. But otherwise, most of the places I have used CPL, like this is a CPL completely. But many times, you don't need any of the filters to do that. But you need to understand your exposure bracketing. So you need to have a DSLR or a prosumer camera where you have more control on your aperture. Otherwise, with your consumer cameras, it will be very difficult to do this kind of photography. Yes, there are apps on your mobiles to do this kind of photography with a sunburst and everything. But if you are experimenting out, probably you need a better camera, better lenses also,
Right.
the whole thing as such. But you can do a lot of moody things with the sun, I will show you 2 experiments also, which you can do generally.
There is another interesting question that has just come
Yeah.
through by Jyots. I'm sorry.
Jyotsna
By
Nirula, I think.
Yeah, just
Okay. Okay.
about the foreground. Right now, in this particular image, for instance, the foreground is actually quite bright. It's lighter than the
Yeah.
sky. But what happens when the foreground is, how do you control it? How do you control the brightness of the foreground so that it does not become too dark?
Basically, I don't at all expose on the sun. The picture is in a manual mode. I do metering without a sun completely. Keep the whole neutral. Meter it from any neutral subject, and take the then underexpose it by 2-stop first, and recompose the image and shoot it, and then do your bracketing plus minus till you get a right effect. Because if you expose it from the sun, your foreground will be completely dark. Completely. So when you are shooting with the sun, don't expose or don't even look at the sun for metering at all. Okay, meter it from other neutral backgrounds, underexpose it, and keep working on till you get a right exposure there itself. Sometimes you get a more darker foreground, but that's why you shoot in the raw, and you can open it up a little bit when you are processing it into the Photoshop or a Lightroom in that way. But you visualize it what you want, then only you can process it better by shooting it, because I know that I can do half or 1-stop open my foreground. Then I allow my exposure to be a little under in the foreground while getting that sun right in that way. So shoot in a raw, use better lenses, because if you have a lens which has more elements, the flare and ghosting chances are more into a sun photograph. If you have a prime lenses, it will help you much better. And also clean your lenses, because I have seen, because of many times with the dust and scratches on the lenses, the ghosting and the flaring happens more when you are shooting directly into the sun.
Yeah, I think somebody actually had a question that exactly about that. If you have the sun in a frame, how to avoid flare? I think the answer to that question is use prime lenses as far as possible, if you can use prime lenses.
And use hood also
lens
on
hood,
that.
of course.
Yeah, use lens hood. Composing it and moving your location also helps. In a particular location, if you are getting a flare, try to move around to find out at which location you don't get the flare. And sometimes that there are only you are getting 1 or 2 flare, which is in an area where you can actually remove, like a dust spot removal tool in a Photoshop, you allow. But sometimes having a flare or a ghosting in a frame also helps adding value to the frame. Okay, so you can also
Right.
use
Sometimes the picture looks
creatively.
beautiful.
You can use creatively flares and ghost both while doing the sun photography completely.
Right.
So the difference
Because the
between
fact is,
difference between a flare and ghost, just for people who are asking. See here, it's completely burnout behind the sun and the right side, and the picture has gone soft. That is a flaring, and where you get this kind of top, you can see that reflection up on the sun, above the sun on the left side. That is a ghosting,
yes,
where you.
correct.
So those are the ghosting effects, and the other is a flaring effect. But again, I will show you how you can use creativity in a ghosting. This is a ghosting completely, but this is a hot
Right,
water
right,
geyser,
right.
and all that ghost, it looks like it's exploding out of that geyser. You know, so
But
you can,
how did you get this particular kind of ghosting?
because of the sun is reflecting from that snow around that geyser, which is built up so many
Oh, so in
times.
several
Yeah,
points. Okay,
it's there are
okay.
so many hundreds of those points that sun is getting ghost at everywhere effect. But you use it creatively by visualizing it also. You know, another visualization which now again the sun will go behind my photo, I think. But this is a desert national park where you can use those. If you see on the right side in the sun rays, there is a little ghosting and flaring up on the sand. But I like that effect there to have that borders of the sand so much, and you can use this. You can use this sometimes to create, anomalies are not always wrong. You can use them creatively in many times into your frames.
So you mentioned that you love going to Ladakh. So in
Yeah.
Ladakh also you like to do the kind of photographs, with the ice, and all these photographs are from Ladakh?
Not all from Ladakh. They are from everywhere. They are. I will show you one picture because a lot of viewers they go to national parks, for the tiger photography as such. So this is a picture from just a park when you are waiting in the morning somewhere. You can use this
Oh yeah.
kind of thing. You can use this lot of things while waiting. See, these are the gypsies waiting for tiger to arrive somewhere. But you can always do this kind of vertical shot where there is a sun in the leaf completely on such, or you can do like this. These all are national park shots, with a wide angle where you can use sun to betterment of your pictures and landscape. So there is always opportunity everywhere to use sun. Sun is always there. Only you need to find it in your frame. Always.
After having visited several different countries, I realized something about India is that, relatively, India is actually a green place.
Okay.
So because you can always find trees wherever you are, and unfortunately, it's also being destroyed, which is also the reality of the situation. But as of right now, sitting in Mumbai, we have a national park within inside Mumbai. I mean, how many cities in the world actually have a national park inside their own city? And we have green spaces, we have places, we have gardens, green spaces which might be slowly disappearing, but which is currently there. And even going to some of these places, you can actually get a beautiful picture of a gulmohar tree in bloom. Things like that are possible even without going inside a national park or a forest.
Yeah. Completely,
So I think
in the town, in the cities, there are always opportunity to find out the greenery and environmental factors to do whatever photography you want to do. Actually, you should do that, because then you get used to doing those things. So you're actually into wilderness somewhere. You get much better opportunity to do a better pictures. So keep doing photography in cities and around where there is a greenery, birds, environment, And one of the things which you were saying earlier, which I didn't came in between when people are saying the wildlife is coming back in the cities. Actually, it was always there. Now we are getting time to see it and hear it. Otherwise, we never used to hear the bird calls. Now, because of there is no noise pollution, you can hear it. But these animals are adapted to the urban environments, and they were always there before also. Only now the visibility and the hearing is more because we are sitting at home. Otherwise, they are always there in the adaptation as such. So keep shooting, and it will help you in the wilderness as such more.
Okay, a couple of just interesting observations that I had. I don't know whether you'll agree with me with this or not. But in wilderness, especially in the wild, recently, we had a workshop in Pench. In that workshop, I noticed the reflectance in the wild is a beautiful thing to observe. How surfaces reflect light, and also how the translucence. So two aspects of it, which is the reflectance and the translucence, various things, including reflectance on the skin of animals, on like you said, rim lighting, how
Hmm.
the feathers or the fur of animal catches the light.
Hmm. Hmm.
So those kind of aspects, how the leaves, are translucent and with the kind of effect that happens when the sun is behind it.
Yeah.
Now, those are some of the beautiful things that I noticed myself, which fascinated me tremendously.
See, I will show you a simple picture of wild roses in Ladakh.
Oh,
You probably
beautiful.
have seen this picture from other
Yes.
side, in a morning light and everything. But this is a 12 o'clock light, and that also in a Ladakh, which is very harsh light you have, you know. But you can do backlighting, silhouettes. You can create a different moods. Now, early morning light, sometimes people say it's very bad. Let me find out a picture for that to see this. Just a
In
little
this,
head and the left of a tiger is shown into the light and the grasses. It's a golden light. Unfortunately,
unfortunately, in this
I am
particular,
there.
yeah,
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 I am there. So
you're the tiger in this
probably
picture now.
probably you can see this. These are the bharals
Oh,
in
lovely.
Ladakh.
Yeah, lovely,
And
lovely.
this is possible because I was at a lower elevation, and the bharals were much high on the mountain on the top, and the sun was behind the mountain. So the only thing was sun was hitting the bharal from the back, and there was no sunlight otherwise. So that's why these kind of pictures are possible. If there would have been sun in the back, now as on the movie, there was one question in between. The sun doesn't hurt your eyes while shooting, So that is one of the, and the last I'm going to say, never look at sun through your viewfinder directly. If you have sunglasses,
Hmm.
good. From your, without glasses, without darkness. That's why I always meter without sun and then compose the image differently while shooting. But while exposing and metering, I do it without the sun completely. And then put my aperture around 16 to 22 anywhere, and then work on bracketing the image. And that's how you will find a point where your foreground is soft light and the sun is into a very different sunburst kind of thing in the end. But never look at the sun, you will damage your eyes. I have been blind for sometime 5-10 minutes because I have missed that. And it goes particularly very very harsh light. So if you have a sunglasses, good. So I generally always use sunglasses, polarized glasses while shooting the sun. I don't shoot it
Okay,
before that. Yeah.
okay. So you're saying that even looking at the sun, even through the viewfinder, can be dangerous.
Yeah, viewfinder can be dangerous. You have a live view, you can always use a live view, but I am not comfortable with live view, so I use polarized glasses. As such.
Okay, that's all.
Okay.
So thank you for having this
Yes.
wonderful session with Better Photography
Thank you,
and Better
Madhavan.
Photography readers. I think it's once once it lifts up, once the entire COVID-19 situation
Hmm.
eases off, I think Kedar, maybe you can conduct a workshop on shooting against the
Yeah,
light.
that's what people are
Something.
saying here. So probably I will also do on the Zoom or something in the near future. Let's see.
Of course, absolutely.
Sure.
And when you do, Better Photography is with you. We will be very happy to do this
Thanks,
session
Madhavan.
with you,
Yes.
and looking forward for you being a judge again with us soon. This
Yeah.
entire episode of this conversation with Better Photography in
Yeah.
conversation with Kedar Bide. It's also one of the things that we are doing is a part of the India Wildlife Forum. So
Okay.
the India Wildlife Forum is something that we had initiated.
Oh, great.
Kedar, if you remember,
Yeah.
yeah, we had initiated this to be so there. So the Wildlife Forum itself is a forum where a lot of information and talks and ideas are exchanged.
Okay.
So the idea of us talking about the environment was not only from a photography perspective, but also from a conservation and environment perspective. That
Sure.
I think we
Sure,
need
Madhavan.
ideas from different professionals
Right.
from.
Right.
So that is how the India Wildlife Forum
Oh, great.
came into
Let's
came into
let's
place.
do something together on that also. In that.
Surely, surely.
Sure.
And to all the viewers out there, thank you. Thank you
Thank
very much.
you. Thank you to all.
Uh, Please stay safe, stay home, enjoy yourself, learn a lot, and of course, be very compassionate to all those people who are having a difficult time during this COVID-19 situation. Let's help everyone. And a big thank you to you, Kedar, for
Thanks, Madhavan.
doing
Big
this with
thank you
us.
to also for organizing these things. Thank you to everybody. Keep shooting. Keep doing creative thing. All the best.
Thank you. All the
Thank you,
best, all the
Madhavan.
viewers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.